This episode has been brought to you from the DGMS Studios, home of Don't Get Me Started, Lethal and Mully Live, and Surftown. Found at Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, and wherever you listen to your podcast. Hello and welcome to Don't Get Me Started. It's the mother of all podcasts with Keith and Lee. Hi, I'm Lee.
And I'm Keith.
G'day, Mully. Another day in paradise. We're back on our second podcast after the break. How are you?
Mate, I'm very well, thank you. And what about your own good self?
I'm very well, mate, and it's another day in paradise.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes that is a little bit overstated here in Noosa. I'm looking at you, and behind you is the studio wall, which is mainly glass. The sky is picture-perfect blue. Beautiful, rich green leaves on the trees that are just swaying gently in the breeze. And it's hard not to think that this is paradise.
Oh, mate, it is. Now, what do you think it is? Do you think we're blessed, we're fortunate, or we're lucky?
Well, I have a little bit of a problem with the word blessed because it donates favoritism, whereas if you lived in another part of the world and you're a good person, but because there's hardships within that country, then you could say you're not blessed, but you could be a better person than we are living in a wonderful environment. Yeah, so I have trouble with the word blessed. So I think we're fortunate and lucky, and if there is a God up there that's merciful and he's been kind to us, and perhaps maybe he hasn't been that good to some other people for some other reasons, other people will have to talk about that. Well, so be it.
Well, we do talk about Noosa a fair bit, I imagine, because I remember we had Ross on and he said, you guys talk about Noosa quite a lot. He goes, you think it's the centre of the universe? And he said, it's not. Well, Ross, we enjoy it, mate, and we'll be in contact with you soon. Stay tuned.
Yeah, well, a lot of people do think that Noosa is the centre of the universe, and I've heard one guy describe it as where God kissed the earth. And for surfers who love the waves that are world-class that come in on the points during our summer season, it has been described as having a cup of tea of God when you surf those waves.
Cup of tea and a slice of cake.
There you go. So, but you see, Noosa has a lot going for it. It's like Venice in a sense. There's canals, there's houses overlooking the canals, there's beautiful beaches. Right in the middle of the town is a national park that will never be built out. And in that national park, there's 5 world-class surfing points. Then you've got all the sporting facilities, you've got the quality of life with all the infrastructure that's here. And if you have a good walk around Noosa, get away from the tourist spots, get away from the well-known aspects of the town or the locations of the town where the action happens, there's a lot to discover inside the town.
It's incredible. Like, obviously, you came to Noosa before I didn't. It's been 32 years since we first came. And I remember then everybody wanted to be the last person in Noosa and they wanted to shut that gate. Sorry, I'm the last one in. Let's close it. It's been 30 odd years and it's still going.
Yeah,
like, Noosa's accommodating everybody in all different walks of life. Back when I was there, it's tradie heaven, as we know. It was incredible because it was transient, Noosa then. If you stayed in Noosa 6 months, you're a local.
Well, there used to be a bit of an old saying when we first came here, which was 35 years ago now.
35? Wow.
Yep, was that how do you become a millionaire in Noosa? You arrive with 2.
Yes.
And I don't think it's the reverse these days.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of business. There's a lot of action that's going on in this town. And I think this is one of its unstated attributes. There's a vibrancy here. There's a sense that there's wonderful now happening in this town. And when you come here in summer and you walk around the tourist areas, the nights are just alive with people who are out dining, wining, talking, enjoying themselves. And you go to a lot of towns that geographically are as attractive as what Noosa is. You don't have that spark, that vibrancy in the air that's bouncing around to say, oh, this is a great place to be because there's something that's alive.
I agree. I think it's a special place. I was talking to my beautiful granddaughter saying, darling, this river, I came here with your daddy at your age and it hasn't changed. The view you're looking at now is the same as what your daddy did at your age. She goes, oh, really, Dad? I said, yeah, it has. And I had a moment then thinking, wow, life has just moved on like the river. Keeps moving on.
Lee, look, maybe it's that big wall of glass that's behind you with the brilliant sunshine coming in that's ruining my eyesight. But you just told me you're a grandfather. I can't see a single wrinkle on your face.
Are you squirting one, Mully? Is that a tear I see in your eye?
Well, I didn't go that far, but I'm just saying maybe...
Here you go. Tone it down for you a little bit so it's not so sunny for you.
Well, I can't see any wrinkles. All right, you've got smile lines, a touch of grey on the unshaven chin. Look, I'm shocked to hear that you're a grandfather.
Well, now, the surfing side of it that you were saying, I just want to congratulate you. Now, to anybody that's listening for the first time, we do multiple podcasts. So we have the Don't Get Me Started podcast, which we're on now. We have a Noosa Now. We have a new one, Lethal and Mully Live, which will be up and running in a few weeks' time with some exciting guests coming on. I hope it's successful. But what is successful is Keith's podcast called Surf Town. I'll let Keith explain a little bit about it, but it reached a little milestone today. So it hasn't been going that long, but you've got over 100 downloads.
Yeah, well,
congratulations.
Well, thank you, Lee. And yes, that is significant. And of course, that's only downloads. We don't know how many people are listening to it without downloading. So it's very, very exciting. For me personally, it's very gratifying. I have the opportunity on Surfdown to interview surfers who have done something significant in surfing or are currently still doing something. Currently and still doing is the same. God.
Another coffee for Mully, please.
4 sugars, thanks. They're currently doing something significant. So they're interesting people. And I not only am interested in what their surfing life is, but who are they? I like to find some background. I'm always interested in people. I used to go out in the past into social settings and there'd be different people there. And I'd be curious, who are you? What have you done? Why have you reached such a place in your life? And of course, you'd ask those sort of questions and people would think I was nosy or had some ulterior motive, but I was always interested in people. So Surftown gives you an opportunity to talk to people who are doers, have a reputation. So I find it endlessly stimulating.
But well done, mate.
Thank you. And I have some terrific guests lined up. There's a guy who I'll be interviewing next week who runs a surf shop in the middle of America. Now, for those of you, we all hear about America, but if you have a look at the map of America, where he is in Milwaukee is hundreds of miles, kilometres away from the coast. So the guy doesn't have a beach, but he runs a surf shop that's only blocks away from the edge of an inland lake where he goes surfing.
It's incredible.
Sometimes in the middle of winter. So instead of here in the subtropics, if we go to the beach, we get out of our car to walk down to the water, to the ocean's edge, we cross the sand of the beach. He and his buddies get out of the car, walk across an ice shelf to get into the water. In winter, they're insane. These guys it's like temperatures similar to the middle of Siberia. And these guys go surfing and they love it.
That's going to be an interesting interview, that one, Mum.
It's another universe.
It's crazy. Now, the other thing I'd just like to mention with the Don't Get Me Started podcast is that we've had a few new countries come on board, and one has been Bulgaria. If you're listening, Bulgaria, please contact us. Send us a line. Don't Get Me Started 2024 gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear why you're downloading. And if you'd like us to talk about any certain issues, please don't be shy. Let us know. But welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really thrilled about that. Or as the English say, chuffed. You chuffed? Are you chuffed?
Chuffed, mate.
About that?
Oh, very chuffed. Or what they say in Australia, stoked.
Yeah, I'm stoked, mate.
Stoked, mate.
How good is that? Well, I think it's very good because being a Western person who remembers the Cold War era, Bulgaria, of course, was part of the Eastern Communist bloc. So we have a tendency to look upon those East European countries as being second world, if you like, if not / third world, and not as equal to us in terms of quality of life. But over the last 20 or so years, a lot of those countries have started to rise up. And even further east, when you go into the Eurasian area, into the stands, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, those places, they're on the rise. So I'm not surprised to hear. In fact, in some areas, they're leaving some of our Western countries behind.
We also have got a lot from Finland, from Sweden. We appreciate it. And don't stop listening, please.
No, I don't. Well, I just hope we grow further in Eastern Europe because it'd be the thrill of my life for us to go over there and do a podcast tour. And
well, we'd do a Lethal and Mully Live over there, I think.
That'd be excellent. And I wouldn't be surprised if I dug out a surfer or two in Bulgaria.
You never know.
I'll tell you something. First time I went to Russia, I went on a whim to St. Petersburg and I was walking along this shopping area and here's this fantastic modern shopping centre mall. And I thought I'd go up there and have a look around. Very foreign country to me. And as I'm walking through this shopping mall, here's a Quicksilver store.
Oh, get out.
And if you look at the map, St. Petersburg is right on the line of the Arctic Circle. And it's on a coast. It's on the delta of a river. But there's no beach there that you can go surfing, as far as I know. But here's this surf shop. Now, obviously, Quicksilver went into clothing, and it's a brand for style, street chic and all that sort of stuff. But they had surfboards for sale there. And here's a poster of Kelly Slater smiling at all us passers-by as we walk past this shop. This did my head in. Here I am in St. Petersburg, way up on the edge of the Arctic Circle, and here's bloody Kelly Slater smiling at me, advertising Quicksilver surfboards.
Good on him.
It's like, what's going on in the world?
Well, thank you, Bulgaria. Molly, what's the topic? I hope that you're enjoying the podcasts and the content that we're bringing to you each week. I want to take a moment to invite you to support the show. Your contributions help us continue creating high-quality episodes, bringing in exciting guests and exploring the topics you love. Every bit helps, whether it's a small donation or signing up for our Patreon account. By supporting us, you're not just helping keeping the lights on, you're becoming part of our community and helping us grow. To show our appreciation, we offer exclusive perks, behind-the-scenes content, and so much more for our supporters. So if you love what we do and you want to see us thrive, please consider signing up at buzzsprout.com/don't get me started, support the show. Thank you for being part of our journey, and let's keep the conversation going. This week.
Well, I've had a little cat's cry going through my head, and I thought we'd talk about this. And the cat's cry is ego a dirty word? And it's a good question. And of course, there was the famous Australian band Skyhooks who sang that song, Ego is not a dirty word. I thought we'd discuss that.
Yeah, I don't think it's dirty. I think we all have egos. It's whether we acknowledge that we have.
Yes, and how we use it.
Well, there's different ways of doing it. Like, I've just got a little something here where it says there's nothing wrong with having an ego and there's nothing wrong with feeling important. But this is the thing, and I get this myself, but the ego needs to be regular.
Well, yeah, let's really pull this apart. Let's go back to the first thing. Do we have an ego? And I think we all do.
We all do.
It's a sense of self, isn't it? And that's who you are, and an awareness of who you are, what you like, what your attributes are, and what you are tending towards doing with your life. So I think it's undisputed. We have an ego. Read out that explanation again.
So it says here, the problems arise when it affects your decision making. It affects your mood, or it turns you into a victim or an underdog, or it makes you feel superior to others in order to justify your behaviour. These things make you miserable.
Well, that's interesting, but that's only if you use your ego the wrong way.
Yeah, well, this is the whole point now. Do you think that your ego lives in the past or the present or the future?
I'd say all three.
So, and does it go on the fact that it is protecting you against others, or you feel insecure or you feel less than that person, and your ego comes up and reacts to that? So where it says that you have to regulate it, which I agree, and we can all have massive egos, that's okay, as long as we regulate.
That's very interesting that you said, does the ego relate to the past, the present and the future? And I think it does, because as I said, for me to understand ego, it's a sense of self. So if I look back in the past and I can say, all right, well, I made some bad decisions, and I can speak personally on this in the past because I didn't value myself enough. I didn't really put enough importance on my sense of self. So I made some substandard decisions for myself because I didn't think I was worthy of that opportunity that came, or I took an easy option where I shouldn't have. Now, being aware of that as you go through the years, you could say, all right, I'm at a point now where certain things are coming to me, so I'm going to make sure that I look after myself. So that would affect the now. And then thinking ahead, I can say, all right, in 5 years' time, I want to be at a certain point. Right now, I'm right here. I'm happy with it, but I think it can be better because I think I'm worthy of it. And I could even say I deserve it. And so in 5 years' time, I want to be in a better place.
That's an interesting point. I like what you were saying before now about yourself. Is there a difference between your ego and your self-esteem?
I don't think so. Possibly. We don't have Jordan Peterson here with us.
It'd be nice.
Yeah, I'd like to have him here and give him a good dose of happiness. I mean, I love Jordan Peterson. He does take on the sins of the world and crucifies himself from time to time. So I'd love to cheer him up a little bit. He might say that there is, but it seems to me that they're tied together. together. I don't think you can separate them. You probably can, but
One of the same.
yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so it says here, your ego takes you away from the present moment. What do you think about that?
No, I can't agree with that. For me, it puts me in the moment. Like I said before, I'm thinking, okay, I know where I am now.
Well, what I think it's trying to say is that we can have conversations. So like I said, hey, Mully, well done. You've achieved so well in Surftown, and I think it's incredible. And so it may take you away from that moment of what I'm saying to you as a compliment.
Oh, I get it.
And take you away from your ego because, oh, yeah, well, that's me because I've done that. So that's what I think it's trying to portray. And I think it does because our mind, so let's not get into our mind, activates the ego. Mm-hmm. And I, for a long time, didn't accept I had any. When I said, oh, listen to you. Oh, how egotistical is that of you? I'm going, I haven't got an ego. That's not egotistical. I didn't understand it. It's such a complex issue of what your ego is. Now, whether it's good for your mental health, because sometimes it needs an enemy to work from. It needs something that, like you said, builds you up, makes you better. Only I can do it. Egotistical.
Yeah, well, that's getting into the negative application of the ego, which is why it often gets a bad rap. That's an abuse. That's not an attribute of what an ego is. You can have anything in life that's good, neutral, or negative or bad. And it can be bad if you abuse it. I mean, you can have a lot of money, and that's something that can work very well for you, your family and community, or people that you love and you want to include in the benefits of it. But you can use money in a way that can destroy you. You could just indulge in too much drugs, for example, just keep buying an endless supply of cocaine, etc., and you just destroy yourself.
So is that your ego?
Well, what I'm saying is you can abuse your ego by inflating yourself. Oh, I'm the man. Oh, I'm the woman. You know, man, like I'm empowered. I've got these abilities. It's my time. It's my time to shine and bugger everybody else. Now, that's the bad side of ego.
Yeah, but that can be stimulated through social media or whatever you're reading, the company that you keep. Now, do you think your ego is a voice in your head?
Yes, it'd have to be because it's telling you things about yourself. It comes back to self all the time. Now, you talk about social media. I remember back a couple of years ago when I was teaching a class, the lesson finished and the kids were just sitting there. We were having a discussion on life. It was a senior high school class. And I said to them just in the last few minutes of the lesson to fill it in before the bell went, oh, guys, where do you think you're going to be in 5 years' time? And this girl put her hand up and she even had a lot of self-belief in herself. And she very quick, she's the first to answer. Couldn't wait to answer the question. And she said, I'm going to be married to a millionaire and just have a life of luxury. Could see that she was just enamored with her own image and sense of self. Her ego was just coming out so strong. And I said, well, how are you going to do that? She said, oh, I'm just uploading all these photos of myself onto social media. And I said, look, I'm sorry to tell you, young lady, but there's a million others doing the same thing right across the whole globe. And I said, if you want to marry a millionaire, there's a chance that he's a pretty smart guy. That's made him the money that he's got. If he's smart, he's going to want a partner who's also smart, not somebody who's just a clever, beautiful picture on social media.
Or a trophy wife. Depends on who they are.
No, and I don't want to deflate your balloon. I said, but I think you better, work on your education.
Good call, Mully. Now, the other thing I was just talking before is a voice in your head. So when you get upset, sad, angry, worry, or fear for the future, is that the voice in your head or is that ego or is that just your mind?
Well, it could even be a survival mechanism.
For me, this is where I struggle with the ego because I've said this before, is I always listen to my one still voice. I center on that or your gut feeling because your gut feeling is probably the right decision to make straight off the bat. And the ego is an entity that I've always struggled with. So wondering what it is, basically.
Well, I have to keep listening to you and listening to this discussion. I keep coming back to a sense of self. And what you just said there, you're listening to a voice within yourself. You're thinking about what you're doing, where you're going. It's a sense of self. How am I managing me, the person, my own individual self? And that gets into not only ego, but ambition. And ambition, I think, is related to ego. Like I said in the past, because I didn't really think highly of my own self-worth, I passed up opportunities because I did not have enough ambition. And I paid the price for that, not only in terms of finances, but in terms of what quality of life that could have opened up for me. So I think ambition is part in this as well, because you can be too ambitious. Like that young lady, she was ambitious beyond her attributes and her worth because she wasn't really the brightest student who had really a lot of things upstairs going for her.
Yeah, but this is where I wonder where it's come from. It's where it's come from the parents saying it. or it's come from social media. Reading the latest magazines that promotes all this stuff, whether it's the misinformation, disinformation, where the source is coming from, which activates and builds and creates that. Because I don't think it's really her. It's what she's bought into.
Yeah, she's a product of the era that she's in and getting all her motivation from social media and so-called influencers.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, just think about influencers. What are they actually doing besides putting up the latest example of them being at the forefront of the latest trend? Are they influencers in trend, or are they influencers in lifestyle, or are they actually making an impact? Like, I mentioned Jordan Peterson before, but there's a number of professional people who you can find on social media these days. Mark Manson from the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is an example. Despite his title, which I think could put a lot of people off, the guy is quality, got a lot of good stuff to say. So there's a lot of good people out there who can truly influence you. The throwaway line of, oh, she's a TikTok, he's a TikTok, and so, I don't buy into it.
Well, is it good to have a big ego?
Yes, it is.
That's the other thing. But it says maybe it's not necessary for good self-esteem.
Yes,
to have
it is.
A big ego.
I think it is.
While it's important to have a positive self-image, a big ego can often mean an inflated sense of self-importance. And that's true.
Say that again.
It can often mean an inflated sense of self-importance.
Just stop right there. It doesn't say that it emphatically is.
Yeah, well, it can't, can it really? Because you can't define. There's no 100%. It's always 99.9%.
So it's implying, again, only if misused.
Okay, so the self-importance or the big ego, which can lead to negative behaviours such as arrogance or a lack of consideration for others. Now, we've all seen that, and we acknowledge it. I see it a lot in others, whether we call it out or not.
Well, let's talk about big egos. Let's go back to history. Let's go back to your country. Let's go back to...
Do we have to?
Yes, we do, because this is a wonderful example of a big ego. Now, who am I going to talk about? Sir Winston Churchill. Why? Now, Sir Winston Churchill was an outsider. He was in and out of Parliament. When he was an outsider, I mean, he wasn't really accepted as one of the boys inside the elite establishment who ran England. Now, he came from a very privileged family, but he was shunned upon. But he would not give up. He was in and out of Parliament. He was elected and thrown out, etc., and then he came back. He kept coming back. What pushed him back? His ego. Now, when he became Prime Minister, when Hitler was on the ascendancy, England was screwed. Hitler moved west in the Second World War before he moved east to take on the Soviet Union. But when he moved west to take on Western Europe, it fell like a pack of cards. France, Holland, Belgium, nobody could stand before him. Hitler's army was mighty, powerful. Next card to fall was England, and they were packing death. And the English establishment was saying, we have to do a deal with this guy. He's going to come over here and he's just going to roll us and just completely conquer our country, which Hitler could have done if he kept going. Now, one voice said to the English people and Parliament, no, we are not going to negotiate with this guy. We are not going to do a deal. And that was Sir Winston. Now, he had, let me just finish this if I could, my good man, he had this massive ego that he alone could not only save England, but the world. Now, that pushed him to prominence to be the lone strong voice that actually rose up the English people to agree with him to resist Hitler. Now, the English resistance wasn't what destroyed Hitler. It was the Soviets, but that's another story. But the point is, Sir Winston Churchill's massive ego saved the morale and rallied the English people.
The interesting fact about Sir Winston,
correcto,
is that his early military career was awful. He wasn't a very good.
But I'm saying he wasn't
in that area.
So, he wasn't the golden boy.
No, and what made me think so? These people, I believe, are made for the day. They feel that piece in history where they stand strong and they fight and they're special.
Yes.
Now, whether it's the ego, whether it's self-esteem, could be a mixture of the both.
Well, if you don't have it, you're in trouble.
But the problem with England is that they do create these, not just England, but around the world, create these figures are extraordinary figures. But the way they treat them after they've done these extraordinary feats is shocking. So the moment war is over, sorry, Winston, off you trot, we don't need you anymore. Duke and Wellington did all that, was Lord Mayor of London. I saw him down in Deal Castle, his death mask. He was in a room probably 6 foot by 4 foot on a camp bed. A camp bed is basically 6 bits of timber nailed together with canvas over the top, and you lay on it. That's all he had. That's what he was left with. So if it was their ego, it didn't really take them forward enough. They accepted what it was. Now, with an ego, which I find very interesting, I'm so glad we had this conversation, is a healthy ego, whether we have a healthy ego. Now, what it says here is allows us to grow with a loving sense of self, rock solid resilience, which I think you're talking about. The ability to solve problems creatively, the capacity to develop, and a sense of meaning, the meaning of you live or you die. Different time. It's interesting you picked Winston Churchill. An unhealthy ego is rooted in fear, anxiety, limiting beliefs, and toxic thinking patterns.
Let's leave toxic thinking patterns for a minute. Let's go to a very healthy ego. Let's talk about people who are the right person for the moment. Not so much historically to save a civilization or a country. Let's talk about Madame Curie, who, a brilliant scientist. Now, what propelled her?
Yeah.
Did she think, oh, hang on, I'm going to discover penicillin, and that's going to save millions of people's lives. Not only that, I'll be famous. I will get glory. Did she have an ego that not only wanted to serve mankind by that bringing in that wonderful medicine?
It's defining it, isn't it? It's defining the ego.
Yeah, it is. Or did she go, oh, this is my moment to etch my name into history? Who knows? So let's go to toxic. Now, you often hear a lot about toxic masculinity, and that is tied with what we're talking about here, the wrong sense of ego. But I want to talk about the word toxic and masculinity.
Okay.
Now, we can have toxic femininity, but you don't hear much about that. But you can. You can have bad feminine behaviour as much as it's feasible to have bad masculine behaviour. Now, let's separate the words toxic and masculine, toxic and feminine. In its pure sense, masculinity and femininity are not toxic. They're just the nature of the gender. What is toxic is the behaviour of the male or the female. So masculinity, which is getting a bad rap in Western countries in modern times, in itself is not toxic. But if applied the wrong way, yes, it is. Femininity in itself is not toxic. But if applied the wrong way with an out-of-control ego, and women can have an ego as much as a man, and they can have out-of-control ambitions as much as a man, and if their ambition and femininity is applied the wrong way, then that's toxic as well. And this has a lot of implications. I was talking to a lady just last week, and she was a bit angry about something. She said, oh, God, she said, if men didn't have dicks, there'd be so much less trouble in the world. I'm standing there.
Well, I reckon it's a good comment.
Well, there's a truth in it. But it's not the be-all and end-all. If we didn't have that member of our anatomy...
But we do think about it.
Yeah, well, yeah, but if we didn't
Sometimes it does take over, Mully, to be honest.
Well, yes, I'm not denying that, but I think her comments were out of proportion because if we didn't have that member of our anatomy, we wouldn't reproduce.
Yeah, but the same as a womb too. Like, we wouldn't be able to do what we need to do. It's a combo. So I agree on both. I'm a centrist, so I agree on both sides unless I'm upset over one area. Then my ego takes over. How's that?
There you go. That's an admission. Well, I was a bit offended, I suppose, because I'm a bloke.
Yeah.
It's like, geez, it's not the only thing that's causing problems. What about corporate greed? That's got nothing to do with your body member. But she has a point, of course, and there's a lot of people who have suffered because of the misuse of the private part. But it's not the cause of all problems.
No, it's part of bigger problems. And bring it on. I like to hear this stuff. It makes you think, and that's what it's all about. That's why I love doing this podcast. It makes me think about.
Well, there's a Hebrew scripture in the New Testament that says the love of money is the root of all evil.
Yeah, not money.
Yeah, that's often
It's
misquoted. Yes, it's often misquoted where they say the love of that money is the root of all evil. It's not. It's the love of money because that brings about greed, theft, and crime, and even murder.
Molly, you have been using scripture quite a lot over these past podcasts.
Well, I'm a Western man. It's the basis of our society or culture,
and
arguably.
Let me ask this question as we're coming to the end. Now, do you think our ego is our sense of identity?
Yes, I do.
And where do you think it begins? In childhood?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I'd have to ask an eminent physician about that.
All right. I wonder because it's got to start from somewhere. Because when you get going and you compete against others and you want to be, but you want to bring across it. You're better than the other guy. I know it. Why do I say it? Because I've done it.
My God, how young were you when you were attracted to women?
7. 7 years old, and her name was, I think it was Mary Purcell, if I remember correctly. If you're out there, Mary, say hi. I have these memories of you in Hollickendane. It was great. So I reckon ego starts child.
All I could say is, Lee, that you're a very healthy, red-blooded male. If you were getting interested in those sort of activities at the age of 7, man, you were off to a flying start.
Well, the activities is just holding hands.
Now, you see, here's the other thing. Now, that lady may have had good reason to say that men's obsession with their dicks has caused a lot of problems, right? But it can cause problems for the male because the individual male allows that propensity to overtake their reason. And instead of making clear, good decisions, they can often make wrong decisions by indulging in the activity that little tiny thing down there, or medium-sized thing down there, or whatever size it is down there, leads you into.
Here we go.
Well, that leads you into, it's like...
Or insecurity. What's that one too? But I love this. Ego has remained and will remain, and whether you have a healthy ego or unhealthy ego, whether you have the big ego or a little ego, you have an ego.
Yes, you do. And I would very strongly urge everybody to make sure that their ego is healthy, that it relates back to your sense of self, that you have self-esteem that's in proportion to who you actually are. Be realistic about your abilities and your attributes and your sense of importance. I mean, we are often encouraged so much these days, we think that we're more important than we actually are. But if you are Madame Curie and you know that you're about to bring in a medicine that's going to save millions of lives, man, have all the sense of importance you like, because you're going to do something extraordinary.
I think the first thing is to acknowledge you have an ego, where that was my case. I haven't got an ego. Of course I've got an ego. Everybody's got an ego.
Yeah. I wish we had the Skyhooks song that we could play here.
We need to get together and discuss it soon, and I could press a button right now.
Yeah, ego is not a dirty word. It most certainly isn't. Look after your ego, look after your sense of self, and be healthy.
And make it a healthy one, absolutely. Now, Mully, we've come to the end of another podcast, and it's sad, but there's always one next week.
There is.
And until then, I'll leave you the last word.
Thanks, Lee. I'll kind of just wrap that up with what I said about looking after yourself. I'd like to say hello to everybody out there that's listening to us. We're thrilled to have you on the World Wide Web with us. We love you all as our listeners. As always, I would exhort you to subscribe, like, and share. So until next time, it's hooroo from me.
And it's goodbye from me.